with that, I will turn this, we will open up this May 4th budget workshop with the Ellsworth City Council. And Dale Hamilton is not here this evening, so we have some staff members who have come at your request for specific information. Captain Willie's here to talk about some leasing options that we've been exploring and to answer some perhaps specific questions you may have on those, not only for the police department but for water and waste, water and highway as well. And then Mike is here from wastewater to address any concerns you may have with wastewater. So, and I know for topics of discussion tonight, we had I had listed capital budget and then outside agencies for specific budget areas that you all were looking to discuss this evening. So, if you don't mind, rather than get into those topics first, I'd rather have the staff members go first so that we can get them out of here, and then we can move on to those other topics, if that's okay with all of you.
Very good.
That's good. All right. Since I think Captain Willie will be a little shorter than Mike, we'll have Captain Willie go first and address the vehicle lease issues and information that he's found out.
Okay to close that? Good evening. So we, literally about 10 minutes ago, finalized some numbers for the leases, and Councilor O'Halloran asked about 2 vehicles versus 5, and so what I did is I eliminated any trade-in potential prices so we could have a flat number to go on. And obviously we'll have some trade that could potentially lower the number. But it was easier than having a bunch of different spreadsheets trying to compare things, just to stick with a couple different options. And so we have some rough figures for the trade, so we would know what that number would be, and I can give that. But so we talked about for the police department leasing 5 vehicles. And the yearly cost for those 5 would be $44,377.44.
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
Sure. $44,377.44. And keep in mind, the sheet I gave you showed a lower number. It was right around 29,000, I believe 30,000. That had the trades figured in that number. So this number would drop with the trades. For 2 of those vehicles, we were looking at $23,998.8. Some of that is based on the 2 that we would replace, are more frontline vehicles than the other 3. So that's the difference in that cost. The vehicles do have some residual to them, but for instance, the Tahoes, our cost would be $46,608, and we would expect at the end to bring in $18,603 on trade after the 5 years.
For 5 vehicles?
No, that's
for
just
one Tahoe.
For one Tahoe,
that is
okay.
that's one Tahoe.
If you bought?
No.
No, so at the end of the lease, we turn it back in. The amount we would expect to get back on that turn in, because they would turn around and sell it at auction, would be $18,603.
After how many years? Sorry.
5.
Yeah.
It's no longer, sorry,
Go ahead.
I'm a little confused. If
Nope.
you're leasing, how do you own it to turn it in?
Because our residual is only $6,291 on that vehicle, and we would be getting the rest of that back.
Oh, so they're gonna cut you into that?
Yes.
In other words, okay.
That's what I do in my car. Like when I just did my
Right,
car, I had $10,000 that I could put towards the next one.
So the lease is a $6,000 buyout, but they're gonna give you the equity that
Yes.
you've created for them, is that?
Yes, yep.
Safe to
Anything
say.
over that, yes, we get. Yep.
To be applied to the next lease. So they're not necessarily gonna cut us a check for $10,000, but we'll
Right.
apply it to the.
Right.
To the leasing of the next vehicle to replace it.
But the good thing is you could buy it out for 6,000 and then have that 18,000 to do what you wanted with it.
Correct.
If you wanted to change out of the lease.
Yep.
Right, okay, sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt
no,
you. I
I'm-
apologize for that.
And the other thing about that is we can buy out of the lease at any time. I mean, there's always, the price is always ticking down, and we can get out of that year one, 3 months, whatever time, if there was a time we wanted to do that. Questions on that?
I don't think I understand it well enough to even ask my question, but the number that he had given us for the 5 cars was the 29,000 something or other.
Yep.
And so tell me, what's the difference between that and
The
the
44,000?
Like, why is that?
That, the 29,000, he had estimated us trading those R5 vehicles in,
I see.
and it lowered that 44,000 down to the 29. He felt that's roughly what he could get for those vehicles.
The difference?
Yeah,
The
so
difference.
they were gonna take 5 vehicles,
Take them and
sell them at auction, and
Yeah.
then what they got for those vehicles, they were gonna apply to the purchase price, the lease price for us.
Which
Okay.
bumps it down to
So
that 29.
these two, the 44,000 or the 23,000, is whether we lease 5 new cars or lease 2 new cars without sending any of our old cars back
Correct,
in.
correct.
But wouldn't we want to, if we were leasing 2 new cars, send 2 cars back?
Well, I guess the thought process was we could sell them outright here, either through auction or.
Yeah, we get a couple different options. I was just trying to simplify the numbers for everyone so that we weren't bouncing between trade-ins and no trade-ins.
Comparing apples to apples.
Yeah.
it
Yeah,
would- it
I-
would absolutely.
Yep.
To be clear, I had felt that this trade-in thing might cloud the number, so he's giving us the numbers that clears that up. You could still go back to what I call the clouded number if you decided to, right? I mean, it's just, this gives you something to work with.
Yep.
Yep.
And then beyond that decision, I would think that you would have to make a decision if you dispose of them through them. I'm guessing, this is the number I wanted, the real meat and potatoes of the thing.
And wasn't there, like, there was this number, whether it's 44,000 or 29,000, then wasn't there another 50,000 to make the vehicles turn into police vehicles?
Correct, that's, and so I looked at that as well, and one of the original ones that we had talked about, they had financed all that equipment, but through discussions, it did not make sense to finance that equipment with the interest rates and things like that. So yes, that'd be a separate line item under the capital for 55,000. And
Per
that
vehicle, or?
No, for all 5,
Okay. And what would it be for 2?
40.
40.
And that's because of the different vehicles doing different things.
Is that every 5-year replacement or when?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, these leases would be for 5 years.
So can the equipment be transferred to the new leased vehicles?
Well, we try to transfer some, but what happens usually is the vehicles have changed and the equipment does not fit those vehicles. So there are some things that we can. It's been an ongoing thing for 20 years.
Also, my iPhone doesn't work anymore, and I don't even know
Right, there's some
why,
things
so-
we can, like laptops, we need to get a new laptop. The laptop has been hot, cold for 5 years, and it's just time to replace it. Usually, we try to use the WatchGuard recording systems at least twice in the vehicles, so we can reuse those, and some of the interior lights.
Could I just ask, did you say it's 40,000 for 2 vehicles or 55,000 for 5?
Correct. The 2 vehicles that are costing us 40,000 really would probably be a little bit more, but we're trying to make some savings here. Our 2 would be frontline vehicles that have all the equipment in them. The other 3 would be for detectives admin. And so they do not have cages, partitions, consoles, things like that.
So, and
Very limited on equipment in them.
if you didn't know Enterprise existed and you were buying this year, would you be buying the expensive ones, or would you be buying the inexpensive ones?
We'd be buying the expensive ones.
Okay.
Replacing two frontline. So
Okay.
in the budget, we had replacing two cruisers, frontline cruisers,
Okay,
which is all the equipment.
right.
The-
Which is 20 grand apiece.
Really about 23, but we have a little bit of money.
Okay.
The
left.
additional three vehicles are, our two detectives' vehicles are, and one of them we won't even be able to use beyond this year because it can't pass inspection. It's beyond being able to be utilized. The other one has about 109,000 miles on it. It's, you know, so it's getting near its useful life, the end of its useful life. And then the third vehicle is an admin vehicle that has 107,000 miles on it.
So you had originally budgeted 146.6 for the cruisers?
Two cruisers,
The two
correct.
cruisers.
Yep.
So when you just switched this over to the lease for the new, what did you budget for? 2 or 5?
Originally, we came forward with 5, which was the 29,000 and change.
Yeah. So that's
And-
what we have in our budget now?
Correct.
Okay.
Does it include the 55 though?
No, yes, the 55 is in capital, the 29, the lease payment would be moved to the operation budget for the PD out of capital. That has not been put into the PD budget because right
Mm.
now, we're still looking at potentially
It was put
deciding
into
which-
debt service though, right?
Debt, yes, it was put into debt
It
service.
was put into debt, okay, the 29. So if we did 2 this year, because I really hate to increase this budget anymore, can we do 5 next year? Does it matter how many we do in a year? Or do you need to do 5 this year if you're gonna, and then go to 2 every year?
Yeah, so, I mean, when we budgeted, you know, 2 for 146.6, some of it is keeping in mind the money. And the reason I came forward with the 5 was because of the significant savings. And we have 5 vehicles that are well over 100,000 miles. So if we wait, which we can wait until next year, we're probably gonna have at least 5.
Right.
Again, with over 100. Some of them are gonna be 130s-ish, 140s. And there's also a possibility we discussed, the fire department vehicles are getting up there as well, and ours that are 107,000 might be able to replace one of theirs with 130 on it,
Yeah.
127, I think.
I just was wondering, because I know Brascal is doing this, but if we started with 2 this year and we really like it, next year we could talk about 5, but we could also talk about the other departments and the leases.
Well, we
When
have,
more time.
we have
Yeah.
information on the
Oh, you do?
Yeah, oh,
on the
yeah.
trucks for water and wastewater, and that's, well, I'll
Yeah.
have Captain Willie
Okay.
give you the details, but that's a really good savings.
Oh, okay.
Anybody got anything else on these ones?
Interesting.
So hot off the press, we'll just talk, the highway pickup, she had, I believe, $62,000 budgeted for exactly what she had spec'd out, the truck, because we would be ordering it, so there's a little bit more savings, would be $45,744. That's a 3/4 ton truck, and it comes with a bed liner and running boards installed in it, which was one of the requests on the thing.
What is the 44,000? I'm not
Excuse me, for the
following-
pickup?
Yeah, but,
The pickup, the sticker price, if you will, is $45,744.
from Enterprise,
Yes.
as opposed to the 62?
Well, 62 is what she budgeted for the truck and equipment.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so we're talking a lease now?
Yes.
Yes.
Right,
Sorry.
and what is
Same
it?
thing for enterprise, yes, same thing for the police, now we're talking about the, yeah.
Right,
highway.
but the 44,000, is that a,
That's not per year, though.
No, there's no 44,000 number for, this is for the highway pickup. So the highway pickup, the sticker price is $45,744
okay,
from
Cut.
enterprise, that's after the government rebates.
Cut down to the lease price, that's where you're confusing them.
Sorry. The lease price for a year is $11,352. and that is with the maintenance plan.
Wow.
And with equipment or no, it needs more equipment?
The equipment is another 13,300 for the highway truck, which is a brand-new Fisher V-plow, the emergency lighting, and a stainless toolbox.
So the total is 24,
24,652.
as opposed to the 62, which is what's budgeted.
That's
And,
And
and that's,
That's
and
for the
that's.
first year.
Huh,
That's for the first year, because you're putting the equipment in it, and then after
Right.
that's 11,000.
a year, right. So we're purchasing the this also includes purchasing the equipment,
Oh, yeah, no financing of equipment.
not financing.
Yeah, the 13,000 is just buying equipment.
So it'd be 11,352 a year for 5 years.
Right.
And at the end, the residual is,
The residual on that one is $4,639 residual. They estimate they will sell that for $16,632, which would be $11,993 in the city's pocket.
So did we decide if it was better to have the residual or not?
Yes, we have discussed that, and as long as it is a true lease,
Yeah, we can't increase our debt service, we have to expense all of this because of our bond debt ratio, which I explained to Enterprise and everybody, so we need to, it has to be an expense.
Which,
So that means we don't have, we can't have the residuals that we're talking about.
Well, we may be able to have residuals, but if we buy anything, we have to buy it at fair market value. If there's any interpretation of us getting like a kickback, we're not compliant with the state and GASB 87. So we need to be careful about how we structure it and don't take on debt, expense it. It's a lease, if it's a true lease, we can expense it. It's just accounting, it's
No,
not
well, I know
a
that.
huge deal, but
But
I
what are you gonna
explained
do with
that
the
to
6,000 at the
Enterprise.
end if we're not buying the whole thing?
we're not buying them at the end.
If you don't lease the entire thing and you have a $6,000 residual, where are you gonna book that 6,000?
Well, that's the thing, that what they're saying is they're offering that as a credit. So I've said from the beginning what it needs to be, so if they think they can do that and still not make it, not add to my debt service, then that's fine. That was the caveat. Because I can't increase my debt service right now. We'll be non-compliant with the state.
Has anybody at Enterprise used the term terminal rental agreement clause?
Not to me.
Haven't heard that?
never heard that.
Okay.
No, I mean, I've had several conversations, one of their executive in their financing was
Yeah.
in some emails and said this is clearly something that they do with other municipalities, and it is a lease.
And she said it was GASB 87 compliant, so as long as we're there, we're good.
In private industry, the terminal rental agreement clause is called a track lease. You've probably heard of that before, a track lease. Well, that's what that is. And that qualifies in private industry to be off balance sheet, away from your debt, all operational costs. And then at the end, you can buy it if you wish.
It's really the
There's
same
no
thing.
equity cut in like you're talking about, which is pretty,
But the intention
Nice.
is to use it as a credit, right? Not to
Correct.
buy it at a discount to market, so
Nope.
that's,
use it towards leasing again.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
so
there
it
wouldn't
would
be
go
any
towards the
kickback
next,
anyways,
it
right?
would
So as
go
long
towards
as
the next
there's
meeting.
There's no
No.
kickback.
Right.
and I'll double check that with my attorney, but there shouldn't be. I've laid it out to them really clearly, and I had an email from my attorney about how it had to be from the very beginning, when Sean and I first started talking about this, so I'll make sure that it's,
well,
that
as
we're
long as
good.
it's off balance, I don't, in private industry, if it's
Right.
off balance sheet, it's, you're accomplishing what you're saying, you know?
Right.
Keep your
I just wanna make
debt
sure it's-
ratios down.
it's compliant with government accounting standards, because I'm not positive about, those are new to me too.
I think the only way that it could have, if that's how he's booking it, and he's just gonna, the value at the end is used as a credit, as long as your vehicle doesn't devalue more than your residual. If it is, we'd have to be, it would have to say that we'd be responsible for any difference. So, that's how we're gonna do it.
And most of these, I mean, minus the residual is still 11,993 estimated at the end of the 5 years, and we all know what vehicle prices are, so I feel like they're in good shape.
Right, and the residual on the lesser vehicles is lower, so. Like the
Yeah.
we know Tahoes and we know pickup trucks, right?
They don't
Maintain their
sell.
value, they have high resale value, especially with 75, 80,000 miles on them, which is the target trade-in, you know, for these vehicles.
I get a water?
We treat it just the same as we would the copy machines, leases and stuff like that too,
That's
or
what it is,
we got those packs and, yeah.
That's the-
Just, yeah, so they would be expensed and.
But there's,
I don't know
I'm
of
sorry.
any
No, go ahead.
others.
But there's no residual on photocopiers and stuff. You lease them to zero, right?
Does this mean that, well, what you're saying, like you can get into the lease, but you can get out of the lease, would that mean that we couldn't get out of the lease because getting out of the lease would fall into this weird zone?
Oh,
You'd have to pay
You
off
just
the
have to pay
residual.
off the vehicle.
You would just pay it out.
Then it goes on your
Okay.
balance sheet,
Okay.
if there is a government balance sheet.
There is.
It's a statement of net position, I think, that's what it's called.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
The maintenance and service plan is for the life of the lease?
Yes, yeah, and that's on the highway vehicles. They won't put it on emergency vehicles. And so for the highway vehicles, that is $492 a year, and that covers oil changes and tires, windshield wipers, those type of things. That's what that $492 covers. They have it broken right down. They pretty much know how much it's gonna cost, so.
That's a 5-year lease as well as the emergency?
Yes, all the leases are 5 years, 60 months, yep.
So Tony, when Ian, when you're talking about your attorney, are you meaning the bond counsel? Okay.
Yeah, but he's been helping me with this particular issue because in the event that we need to get any more TANs or vans or anything
Yeah.
like that, we need to, we're just about to do a $3 million bond issue, so for the rest of the year, I had to agree to that. Like, I had to say, we're not doing anything else. This is what we're doing. So no more debt for the rest of the year. But part of the problem was that I took all those ban takedowns that were expensed last year. They didn't come down till this year, and so that all got added on for the year. It's almost like double dipping because not only we take the ban proceeds down, but then we turned around and refinanced it.
Okay, so it has to do with
Plus all outstanding
refinancing,
debt.
not.
Plus all the outstanding debt already, or what we have. I'll send you an email about it and
Okay.
explain to you what I'm talking about. As long that have you read GASB 87 about capital leases? You can't
Long
sleep,
time.
it's a good one.
Okay.
But that'll give you what I'm talking, that'll, I think, explain it better, what I'm trying to explain to you. Because now that's gospel of the Lord, and you have to be compliant with it.
Okay,
And that specifically deals with leases.
okay. Yeah, I have it written down in my
Okay.
spare time.
I have a question and a statement. The question is, has Enterprise talked about insurance?
Yes, we had a brief conversation with that, and just to make sure we did not have to put anything additional on, and they said ours was fine. Our insurance through MMA is,
So the city is going to insure their asset and provide proof of insurance?
correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So was there another vehicle? So was there another vehicle?
Water.
The water has,
Pickup truck in there.
water is very, very similar. They're $11,352 a year for the lease. Their equipment is the only thing different. They didn't need a plow, they're just having the push plates put on. So their equipment, dollar amount was $10,400 for the first, year. And then it's back, back to the $11,352 for the additional years. And that also has the maintenance plan for $492.
And that's a 3/4 ton?
That is a 2020, let me get the right page. 2024 Silverado 2500 HD work truck 4x4, regular cab, 8-foot box, 142-inch wheelbase, 3/4 ton pickup, 6-point-liter gas V8 with direct injection.
So to put this in perspective, that's $1,000 a month for a 3/4 ton pickup. 11,
It's 905, not counting the maintenance for the highway,
okay, so
Yep.
11,352 a year.
with the
Okay?
maintenance, yep.
Right, so round numbers, you're talking $1,000 a month. Okay, put that in perspective, I currently lease from Enterprise 2 one-ton dualies, 4-door, okay? And I'm paying $2,000 a month for each. So I'm just throwing that out there that, yeah, we're leasing more of a truck, but you're at half price over what I'm paying. And that's to your credit. That's, it's not truck for truck, but it's, I'm paying 2 and you're paying 1. I just would like to point out that it sounds very fair. I realize municipalities are getting much better deals in private sectors, but if I'm paying $2,000 per truck and you're paying 1, there is a differential in the trucks, but still, I mean, that's, it's an attractive price.
Yeah, some of the savings on these highway vehicles is we're able to order them from the factory, so there's a little bit more government incentive savings there, and a couple of the things that they wanted can come on them already. Yes?
For the maintenance costs, does that sound right to you, that it should cost whatever, $400 or $500 a year for windshield wipers and tires and stuff?
Yeah, considering an oil change is somewhere around 100 to 120 we're paying, and 4 tires rotated is another $100. I think that's very, very fair. And that's not counting an air filter for 30, 40 bucks. I don't know what the 3/4 ton goes for, but
I just had a Traverse done, oil change, cabin air filter, engine air filter, $300, so.
What's outside of their maintenance? Are you responsible for tires, windshields?
no, they put one, I believe it's one set of tires a year on up to one set of tires a year on the truck. We would be responsible for broken windshields, but like taillight bulbs, things like that, that's all things that they would cover.
That's common in any lease, the windshields are always
Yeah.
on the leasee.
So did you say for the $400 includes a set of tires too?
Yes,
Oh.
tires. Yep.
Every year.
It's every so many thousand miles. So basically, under this warranty, let's say we continue to use Saunders, he would sign on with them. When the truck would come in, he would say it needs X, Y, and Z. They would say yes or no, and put it on, and he would send them the bill, they'd pay it.
I don't really see a downside here. Has anybody identified a reason that we haven't been doing this across different departments? Is there something clear?
New,
It just hasn't
new
been
to
done?
us,
Okay.
yeah. It's we heard about somebody else doing it, and so we started looking into it to see what we could do.
So originally, 2 police vehicles was about 150,000.
Yes, because when we put in the 146.6, we don't even have the price for the 2024s.
5 police vehicles, how much would that be for, like, say, the first year?
It's 44,377.
Plus,
Plus the stuff is still way under the
55.
100
It's
and,
55,000.
99,000.
and you
is what we
had
have to budget.
146 budgeted for replacing 2,
Yes.
and you can replace 5 of them for less? And do it on the schedule that you're trying to get done?
Yeah, I mean, it's something about, if we went that road, it allows us to get into a schedule with Enterprise, assuming this all works out within a 5-year plan, so that we would be getting rid of all our vehicles around the $75,000 or 75,000 mile mark, which is in turn gonna boost the residual price that we're getting back to go towards the next one.
So for this year, we would be still 50-something thousand dollars under what was budgeted already for it.
Yes.
And you're
Or
getting
more if we decide
5
to
vehicles
send
instead
5 of ours back.
Right.
Because if you only do the 2, then you're gonna pay 80 or 90.
The two of them, if we do the two, the vehicles are $23,998, and the equipment would be about $40,000,
So you're
so
gonna
we're
have
at
90,
$63,998.
so 30,000 less to do 2. That's all you, I don't,
and then you have the risk of, with them being over 100,000 miles,
have
of
them breaking
breaking
down
down,
and
and
paying
we're
a
gonna
big
have
repair.
some more money that way.
I personally would feel like if you did the 5, it would be smarter, for my opinion. You're, and it's saving a little bit of money anyway. And then the pickups, seems like that would be less than what we've already budgeted for them too, so.
Yeah, significantly.
$80,000 savings with the 2 pickups. That's budget.
And
Well,
50
for the
with the
first
police
year, right?
vehicles. But you'd be doing 3
Yeah,
instead
off
of,
this
I mean,
budget.
5 instead of
Off
2.
this budget. I mean, compared to buying it, you don't have to pay every year. That
Yeah.
exaggerates the.
Yeah, yeah.
It's true that's a saving on this year's budget, but buying to leasing.
Right,
doesn't-
long term.
But next year you
Long term,
get-
you're gonna pay for the vehicle over the 5 years, but you're spreading it out over 5 years instead of paying it all this year.
And
Next
paying
year,
less.
if we trade in 2 this year, next year we'd be trading in 2, and the year after that, we'd be trading in 2. Right, because that's what it's been the last few years. No matter what, you're gonna trade in 2, so the cost of the payment is still gonna be less than the 2.
Yeah, right, I mean,
No
on the.
matter what.
on
You wouldn't be trading in 2 next year, or
The,
you still would, but you're getting them on
when we were
lease.
looking at the lease with no aftermarket in there, but it had the trade-in in there, the top payment for the police department was 90,741 one year, and the rest of the years were in the 80s. So you're still less than the
Still
one.
less than $150,000 every single year.
cars.
Right.
Yeah.
And, yeah, and that price is just gonna go up. I mean, we've seen in the last 10, what do we figure, 10 years? Did we go back 10 years or 5 years?
I don't know.
The price has gone up from the cruisers, like,
But we know the Fords went up
$40,000.
over $5,000 in 1 year. Not this year, but last year.
Everything's going up.
But we don't have a guarantee that next year that lease won't be more if we do 2 more, right? I mean, that could go up.
yeah, the lease will go up incrementally according to the increase in prices of vehicles. But the difference, part of the difference too is, so when we purchase vehicles, we're not, well, we try to avoid ordering them because there's such a long lead time for ordering them. So we're purchasing vehicles and not getting as good a deal as we're going to get for the vehicle purchase price through Enterprise. So that's kind of a built-in savings that right now we don't necessarily aren't able to take advantage of because Enterprise is good. They have these vehicles already ordered, they have vehicles coming in that are gonna be able to, we're gonna be able to purchase at that reduced cost, where if we go out to bid through our normal bid process and we have to order a vehicle, we're gonna be 6, 8 months before that vehicle comes in for us to be able to take advantage of that savings. So what we've done the last couple of years is we paid a little bit more for a vehicle rather than order it because the dealer has had it on hand. And the other issue we've had over the last couple of years is very few dealerships have been responding to our bid requests. Darlings didn't even
Hasn't,
respond
yeah.
this year, and so the only bid spec we had was from one dealership in the entire, the
What are the downsides to it? I mean,
Are there
have been
other
pointed out anything?
Are there other companies other than Enterprise that do this? Or is Enterprise kind of unique?
I don't know of any.
I did ask him that, because I figured that somebody might ask that. There are some, yes. I don't know who they are, and my research did not pop them up. And
So
the
these
reason
guys are
we've,
kind
the
of the
reason
main
we've
guys.
gravitated towards Enterprise is I've spoken with people that are using it in what we want to use it for, and it's working, so I feel kind of safe by that, so. And the other thing, when we're talking about ordering or purchasing off the lot, this price for these two Tahoes are 2023s. The 2024 prices haven't come out yet, so we don't even know what those are gonna be, but there are still some on the lot that we can access.
What about mileage? I mean,
We are not restricted to mileage. They estimate 15,000 miles a year on our frontline vehicles.
is that what you guys do? Or-
We do anywhere from between 12 to 15,000. We're putting on somewhere between 225 to 250,000 miles a year,
On all of them?
total fleet. So yes,
It's not bad. I put 20,000 miles a year on my car, so back and forth to Bangor, that's not bad.
There will be downsides to this. There will be surprises that come to it. But I will throw this out. Every surprise and every downside, you need to consider what it would be like if you own it. For example, there's some disagreement between Enterprise and Saunders and the city, and Enterprise doesn't want to pay for it, and your car is there, and you need it back on the road, and so there's a little squabbling going on between the companies, and you end up taking the bill, which wasn't part of the plan. However, on the other side of that is, if you owned it, you was going to take the bill anyway.
right.
Right? I mean, so, you're gonna have some hiccups there. I've had a lot of full-service lease vehicles and, big trucks, Kenworths, you name it, and there's gonna be downsides. But the downside doesn't seem to me, I'll give you an example, Ryder Truck Rental and a Kenworth dealer were fighting in Georgia, and my truck was there, and I paid $8,000 to get it out. Okay, but what would I have done if I owned the truck? I'd have paid $8,000 to get it out. So that needs to be remembered, because you are gonna have some disagreements, some surprise costs, but the surprise isn't gonna be any worse than when you own it. The downside to that is, if you've got anything over 5 years old in your fleet, then you've lost the use of that in your leases. So if you've got some 6, 7-year-old vehicles in your fleet now, used as spare vehicles, that's all done. Because it's a constant turnover, so you don't get that extended value, but you haven't paid for it either in a lease.
Yep.
Do you use Enterprise?
Yes, I have. Well, I use Ryder, Chrisway, Penske for big trucks, and I use Enterprise for small trucks. But I only have 2. And Enterprise is a fine company. Fine company. They, just look at their stock. They're a fine company. There's gonna be hiccups, so on. I don't know how you handle the registrations, but I assume the city provides the registration for it, or does that?
Yeah, no, They will register the vehicles, but we will register them because they're police vehicles.
Right.
Yeah, yep.
So there's, there's a few challenges, but the challenges, I don't think are as big as the benefits.
All right.
So if I'm understanding it correctly, if we decided, yes, let's go forward with 5 cars this year, then we still have to decide, are we sending in our 5 cars to get it back down to that 29,000? Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we need to decide what we're gonna do with the excess vehicles, whether we're gonna sell them outright and
Or
then
put them
apply the
into
money, or go back to the original proposal from Enterprise, which was for them to take the vehicles and sell them and apply the money.
Yeah, so what do you think we should do?
I think we should hold on to them and sell them as needed. I think, I mean, Enterprise was only talking about getting 3,000 to 3,500 a vehicle. On our trades in the past, some of our trades, we've gotten anywhere from 4,500 to 6,000 from Quirks. So I think
For the Ford
for the Ford Explorers.
Explorers, yeah.
There's one vehicle we're not gonna get any money for, but the other 4, I think we could easily put them on the lawn for auction and get 3,500 minimum out of them.
So what are the numbers once you do that? Because that will need to be.
It's 3,500 times 4,
14,000.
Right.
14,000.
14,000. So you're down to 30,000.
Yeah.
Because
So you would
we're at
factor that in.
30,378.
Or what if you got more for them? Which,
You're
And
even
that
lower.
just goes-
It just goes
So-
into that capital account.
So
Right.
if we, I'm sorry, if we do that, because we'll have the vehicles, the leased vehicles and signed everything by the time you sell it. So would
Yes.
you just put that towards the $50,000 to outfit them then, or you can't then put that down to reduce the lease if you've already signed the lease, right?
Right.
No,
So
he told me that if we had money right now, we could put all kinds of money down on the lease if we wanted to. So yes, we could put money down on the lease to lower the payment.
But if you don't sell the vehicles until after you get the new ones, then you can't do that.
Correct.
Okay. So your lease is gonna be your lease, and then it would be whether or not that 30,000 comes off the price of,
Yeah, it would be whether we line itemed
Right, but if
44
you-
or,
If you budgeted 44 and then, for simple math, let's just say we got $10,000 for selling those vehicles, and you take that $10,000 and just apply it to your payments.
over 5 years. I just
or
want, if,
however you wanna do it.
Or you put it in your capital account for the purchase of the equipment
Right.
for the upcoming year's vehicles.
Yeah, you could put it towards next year's or
I don't think that we could reduce the budget because we're not gonna know what we're gonna get for those
Right.
vehicles. So it would be kind of a crapshoot.
But if you said you knew it was gonna be 3,500, you could do that.
Right. But yeah, there's no way to necessarily know, because even the 29,000 that he quoted originally was an estimate based on what he believed he could get for trade-ins for the vehicles, but that number will fluctuate depending on what that actual value is of those trade-ins.
Aside from the lease, how do you handle that now when you sell them? Goes back in,
Mhm.
right? Sells them. So
It's-
it's
it's
no
different.
different.
Yeah.
If you bought these and you dispose of them, that's one thing. If you lease and they go back in, that's another thing. And but I don't think we have to know what you do with the money when you sell surplus equipment.
not if we sell it, but if they're doing it to reduce,
Right,
and
right.
reduce the lease, it sets your payment for the 5 years.
Right.
That's all I was thinking is,
the other thing is, with these, let's say we signed the contract today, we do not make any payments until we receive the vehicles. Everything is done. As soon as once those transactions are done, with the lease contract, then it would be another 30 days, if you can attest to that, Steve, or not. I'm pretty sure that's what you
It's
told
an
me. 30 or
in-service date.
30 or 45 days from the date of signing would be the first payment. So there may be some time to move that money to them.
Usually, the ones I've signed, you know, you make an agreement and they order the vehicle and whatever, and then you, it's called an in-service date. And when it's in-serviced, meaning when you go to work, that's when your 5-year contract starts. And that's in the private world, I can't speak to this.
My bottom line is, it saves money.
So you
Period,
budget
right? There's no question.
44,377, or you budget the 90,000, whatever?
So
For
the
the
budget,
equipment.
it'll be budgeted in two different places. So the 55 for the equipment will stay in capital improvement, but the 44 will go into the debt service.
But we're not gonna factor in selling the cars at all unless we go with letting them sell it. Then we can factor it in. What do you think about that?
I think it's fine.
Do you think it matters either way?
No, I mean, it just, the only reason I was thinking about that other is for like next year, you know what that payment's, that payment's gonna be reduced. If we use it towards the lease, it's reducing that cost over 5 years. If we sell it ourselves, it's just putting it into revenue for next year. That's the difference. So that's why I was thinking, if we're gonna keep going, that's gonna keep going up. But I don't know how much of a difference it would make annually, I don't know.
Well, once we get so that our entire fleet is leased, assuming we stay with the program, then we would no longer be selling vehicles. Then the vehicles would be turned over to the lease company. We would get new ones. Any residual value after they sell them would be applied to
To that
the
lease,
lease
yeah.
going forward. It's where we're in this kind of tricky spot where we own these vehicles, so what we do with them is really our choice. And if we get into a situation where we're just turning in 2 police interceptors and they're telling us that, you know, they're likely to be able to sell them for $5,000 or $6,000, then that would make sense. But where we're potentially turning in multiple vehicles and the value that they're giving us for all of those vehicles is relatively low, we think we could probably do better by selling them ourselves and get more for the police interceptors, the one detective vehicle that has value, than trading it in and just getting a lump sum for what they sell all 5 of the vehicles for.
And where would that money go?
Most likely, I would recommend that we would apply it to the capital account for the cruiser equipment, so that next year, if we are replacing 2 cruisers for $40,000 worth of equipment, rather than budgeting 40, we budget 30, because we would have $10,000 brought forward in that account for that purpose of purchasing the cruiser equipment from the sale of those police vehicles.
That makes sense.
So when we sell that though, and you come to council for approval to accept the bids, we'll have to put that in somewhere in the agenda item saying that we're gonna hold that for next year.
Yeah.
So consider it as like a special revenue.
One thing that I see as a danger is replacing more vehicles than necessary, and like the other trucks that we're talking about for different departments. Can't just go lease vehicles because it's a good deal. We gotta determine that we need them before we decide whether we buy them or lease them. I think that's an important factor, because the price looks attractive, but if we don't need it, the price is unattractive.
Is that?
Well, I can tell you that the 2 small SUVs that we got on the list to lease, the yearly cost is $5,653. And we are going to spend all of that and more if the transmission goes in one of those vehicles, which is not unheard of for that to happen.
I think police vehicles are a much different need than perhaps pickup trucks that aren't on an emergency basis. I get the police thing, but I don't always get everyone having a new pickup.
Well, the four-wheel drive for the water company replaces a two-wheel drive that they can't even get around on.
No, that's what they did this year.
Oh, okay.
I'd have to go back and look at what. I don't know if I have it.
Bottom line is last,
So the highway truck, the 3/4 ton highway truck is replacing a 2009 3/4 ton shop truck, pickup truck. It was originally the Foreman of Myron Grant. When originally purchased, this truck will no longer be able to be stickered and has been patched, limped through the last few years. This truck is critical as it serves as one of the trucks that crews use to haul material and equipment out to job sites throughout the city. This department has had multiple hand-me-down.
That truck was beat on. I can't believe that truck's still on the road. Myron plowed to that thing.
That's,
The main road.
Like.
The main roads,
The
yeah.
main
Lane
roads.
and all of those, he
guess
beat
what-
on that truck.
I just want to throw this out, that last Monday, we talked about, we've got to find new ways and new thoughts and new procedures to stop this big increase. And this looks like a tool that we're looking for.
I would agree. So, do we just, we can't vote at a workshop, but should we just have the 5 and the other 2 included in the budget to be voted on for now, and then,
Looking
I
for
say yes.
the water truck
I would
one?
try to do
Oh,
the
the
5,
five.
it didn't seem like it's
Yeah,
much
5,
more.
and then the water
and then the water and the highway?
highway, yeah.
Let's see what that looks like in the budget.
Mhm.
I wanna hear about the water truck. I mean, it seems like the highway won't get stickered again, but
Right.
it is necessary to replace it.
I have the water one, Glenn, if you
do
want.
you have the water
Yeah.
one? Oh,
The water request is replacing a 2013 3/4 ton 4-wheel drive with plow and lift gate. The new truck request will utilize the existing plow and lift gate, so that's just a straight truck purchase. This truck will be used to assist in snow removal of storage tanks, treatment plant, and other water department areas. Will be a primary vehicle for towing the air compressor and vacuum trailer and carry other items that are bulky. The proposed figure that they've provided includes strobe lights, side steps, plow running gear, and fitment of the existing lift gate.
Say how many miles
On the
is
sheet,
there?
it doesn't say how many miles are on that truck.
I thought they wanted a new lift gate.
His request that I have is using the existing, unless he's changed his mind.
Well, when I talked to Lisa today, I thought she was pretty clear that it needed a lift gate, so. The lift gate changes the water department $1,700 for the equipment side if they didn't get a lift gate.
I'd just like to throw out this, and I was against hearing that we were switching plows. You're taking the value off when you take a plow off. If you're gonna get a new truck, put a new plow on. If you're gonna get a new truck, put a new lift gate on.
I
And
think
then
you
you've
said it
got
was-
something to sell.
Fairly new plow.
You're making messes here. Put the plow on with the truck, age it at the same time. You've always got surprises when you're doing that. I'd be in favor of 2 cruisers and the 2 trucks. I'm not in favor of advancing anything further than what we need to do.
okay. So what, we will prepare budget documents both ways, and since we can't vote, and then when we get to the point where it's a vote, then we'll take a vote. And but we'll have it prepared either way.
That'd be great.
So that we can just switch it out.
Interested,
We're gonna look
interested to
at-
see how much it is per vehicle with the 5 versus 2.
And thank you for finding this and doing all this
And
work.
how much is already budgeted for that
Yep,
stuff?
thank you.
Because it's obviously gonna be quite a bit less. Which would be great.
All right. Sean, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
problem.
much.
Have a good night.
So,
Michael? So, at Councilor O'Halloran's request, I asked Michael to come to speak specifically about the wastewater treatment plant and any questions that you may have. I know he has a brief presentation to hopefully maybe give you some insight and answer some potential questions. Mike?
Yep. All right, so I actually had prepared this presentation a while back.
Did I unplug it?
I don't know.
You push the button.
Jason? It's on my computer, so it's fine.
The tree warden and the electronic guy. Here he is.
This is why we can't make these things. Can you also upgrade my iOS?
I hate that every time you upgrade this thing, you just like.
I just
"How
always
did they
press
do
no
it?"
later. I tried to download an app the other day, and I was like, oh my god, I can't fix this. And it was like, you're on like 10 operating systems behind. There's no way to fix what you've done.
Oh my gosh, it's too funny.
Ow.
Boom.
I don't dare not to, it's afraid
Yeah,
to go
no,
away.
Yeah,
you're
we have to
smart.
tame
You're
everything.
smart. Turns
I know, I never
pressing
like
the
it.
ignore button. You know, I hate it. So like I don't like the letters, so it's different.
All right.
You're pretty familiar with it, Mike. I think you can.
Okay. So like I said, I had prepared this presentation a little bit ago. It's not very long. I was gonna bring it to the finance committee meeting, and then Steve was unable to attend that week, so we never ended up seeing it. So I just updated it, to give you guys an idea of, where we started with this whole thing and where we're at now. So just a quick history, 2004, we hired Warren Kern to start evaluating the possibility of a new facility. 2009, the city was ready to move ahead with the project, and the council voted to build a new facility on site. As part of that design process, the city recognized that we needed to generate some revenue. So two options that we came up with were creating a limited certification lab, which we did not do, and to also start to accept hauled waste. I don't think that's- So this slide just shows when we were talking with Warren and Kern about the key issues for building a new plant, revenue generation was one of the key issues that we looked at, and septage and laboratory, the limited certification laboratory were the two options that we had spoke about. So when we constructed the plan, we wanted to figure out what do we need to do, you can go on. How much money do we need to charge in order for us to be able to at least break even? So we hired Wood and Curran to do a cost analysis throughout the plant, whatever equipment was needed or used to process the hauled waste. And as you can see, at 4 cents a gallon, we had a profit of $14,684. And so this next slide is that cost estimate. And now this cost estimate is no longer gonna be accurate because we changed how we do it and we used less equipment. So I have spoken to Brent and they are doing a new cost analysis based on the current operations of the plant. But I have hard copies of this, if anybody wants one, right here.
I'd like one.
Yeah, I figured. There you go.
Thank you.
There's probably gonna be some stuff on there that you don't necessarily know because you're not in the business, but just call me or whatever and I can help go through it with you. All right, so then we opened and we experienced exponential growth. So we started it with the cost analysis, 4 cents a gallon. I checked to see what Brewer, our main competitor, would be charging. They were at 6 cents a gallon, so we went to 6 cents a gallon. We started at 6 cents a gallon. 2015, we started getting calls from other plants that wanted us to take their waste sludge because they couldn't dewater it, and the Bar Harbor was one place that they were sending it to. Bar Harbor was having major process issues. They didn't want to take it anymore. So they started calling us. So we have 5 other towns that send stuff to us, and we charge them per gallon to send it to us. So then our volume has increased again lately because PFAS is a big issue that's hitting the environment right now, and so there were customers that were spreading on grounds, and the contamination level for the PFAS was too high in that ground, so they couldn't spread on the ground no more. So they had to start sending sludge to us. And it wasn't that they were contaminating necessarily the ground. Like, one of them was next to an airport, and the glycol that they use to de-ice the runways and stuff, super high concentrations of PFAS. And so as that ran off into the surrounding land, it contaminated the land. So they couldn't spread on it anymore. But anyway, so they started coming to us. And then we also started just taking RVs, allowing RVs to come to the plant dump, and we just charge them $20 to come dump the RV. So currently, we charge $70 per 1,000 gallons for the waste that comes from other towns that's already treated. So we don't really have to treat it, we just dewater it. Septage, we charge $90 per 1,000 gallons. We do have to treat that. And grease trap waste, we charge $110 per 1,000 gallons because grease trap waste is the worst waste to have to treat. And then as part of this new budget, we actually included in this budget a 1 cent increase across all of the rates. So 1 cent per gallon equates to, that would be 80, 100, and 120 is what our new rates would be if the budget passes as it's proposed. So Brewer currently is charging $70 per 1,000 gallons. And I spoke to their superintendent, and they're looking at possibly increasing to $75 per 1,000 gallons in this budget cycle. So we are already well ahead of them in our price structures now. So this is the trajectory that revenue has taken since we started. So all the way up until this past year, and I don't know if it was something to do with COVID, I'm not sure why, but we kind of flatlined a little bit. It looks more dramatic than it is, but, and then this year, this is a projected number right here for '24 is around 400,000 gallons. We are already at 340-something thousand gallons as of May 3rd. So I just took what we did for May and June last year and I added it on to project that number. But I think it's actually going to be higher because we're doing more this year than we were last year already. But I just stayed conservative and added that number on because it's a real number. So, up until June 30th of 2021, we had done $1,737,865 in revenue. This slide is from our old computer system. We switched to a new computer system. So rather than try and put 2 of these pages up here, I just added what the actual was for septic revenue in 2022. And this is the projected number for 2020. This should say 2023. The budget year we're about to finish for the next 2 months. So our total revenue, since we started from the get-go, $2,449,260. And this number, these are numbers pulled right out of our unit system. So, here's your total revenue. Chemical costs, the main, biggest material that we need to dewater is polymer. That's every bit of polymer we've purchased since 2013. Sludge disposal, this is the sludge disposal cost that we've paid to any vendor over the last, since we opened. So it was Casella Organics, then when we split with Casella Organics and we went with Main Organics, all those costs are in this number right here, all pulled out of Munis. And then this is maintenance costs that we've had since the get-go. And it includes the major services we've had, included all the work we had to do on the centrifuge last year, and we had the issues we had last year. So this is all of the maintenance costs that we've paid out to, GEA is the company that is the manufacturer of the centrifuge. They're the ones that come up and do the major service. They're the ones we buy all our parts and stuff from. And so that's that number. And so at the end of that, we're still left with $1,198,358 in profit. So, you can, I haven't pulled electricity out of there and, you know, how much electricity we would spend. I haven't pulled any of some of those other ones out. But even if you took $200,000 for miscellaneous expenses that I didn't count in, we're still plus $1 million. And I don't even know that you'd be able to find $200,000 in miscellaneous expenses to pull out of that. Because the only machine that we deal with at the plant that deal with it, so we put it in the sludge storage tank, and there's a blower that aerates it, so you would count the electrical cost from the blower, 2 blowers. And the only thing we've ever done to those 2 blowers is oil changes. Those are not the main blowers that aerate the rest of the plant. Those are just for those tanks. And then what I actually put in for capital to get rid of is when we changed our operation to not put this all the way through the plant, just to take it from the septic tank it gets put into when it arrives into the storage tanks that we dewater out of. We use a gas powered pump to do that. And so the guys, you know, drag it out, set it up, set the hoses up and everything, pump over to the sludge storage tank. In the summer, we just pretty much leave it there all summer outside, but in the winter, can't do it because it'll freeze. So in the winter, every day, we gotta go, haul it out, set it up, run it for the day, pick everything up, haul it back inside, and that's the operation. So the capital project that I put in for is for us to be able to put a pump actually inside the septic tank that would run off either the floats or the existing ultrasonic level device that's in there. And it would tell that pump when to turn on and off. And we would get rid of the gas powered pump and all the labor surrounding having to set it up and tear it down and move it. But in a nutshell, this is where we're at with all of the major components taken into account. And these are all actual numbers that we've paid out, checks to vendors that we have in Munis.
Mike, so what you take in for sludge, or
Septic,
septic,
whatever.
thank you, doesn't go all through the system? Like,
Nope.
so what's?
The plant was originally designed for us to take it in. It was gonna go into, I think it's a 12,000 or 18,000 gallon tank. And then there was 2 pumps that were going to pump it back to the head of the treatment plant and put it through the system. But when they designed that, they had no idea how much we were going to get. So when we first started, we did that. But then as it exploded, you can't put it through at a high volume because it doesn't work well with the plant. It's 2 different microorganisms. So the plant doesn't like if you put too much in it too fast. So that's where we made the change and said, you know, I just said, we're not gonna put it through the plant. We're just gonna pump it in the storage tank and we're gonna dewater it, worked great. Because we were dewatering, we have our own stuff. We produce our own, about 2 million gallons a year is our stuff. That's not even counted in this, obviously. But it doesn't dewater very well because we don't have primary clarifiers, and I'm not gonna explain it to you because it would bore you, but. By putting the septage directly into the storage tank with our waste sludge, it acted as a primary, and our dewatering, instead of sending 20% solids out, we're average probably around 22, 23, and we've been as high as 30% solids, which means you're paying for a lot less water and a lot more solids going, what you should be paying for. It's much better, works much better for us. And so, no, the answer to your question is it doesn't go all the way through the plant anymore. It just goes into the septic tank. We use the gas power pump to transfer it to the storage tanks, and then it goes through the centrifuge and shipped to Canada.
So the water that comes out, that
Mhm.
must go through chlorination and dechlorination.
Yes, the water that comes out, the centrate that comes out does go back to the plant.
It does. So that's not included in there though, right?
That's not included in there. It's highly treated, it's pretty clear. I guess what I would say is, if you shut it off, you're not changing anything in the plant. The plant's gonna still do the exact same thing. We're not feeding more hypochlorite because we're dewatering. We're not feeding less hypochlorite because we're dewatering. If, the days that we don't run, we make no adjustments to the plant. The plant still does exactly what the plant does. If it was a situation where we were going to have to feed extra hypochlorite because we were dewatering, I would have included that in the calculation. But the plant is steady state, whether that's on or off. So, but Woodard and Kern is gonna do a cost analysis on it, updated cost analysis on it anyway. And so I'm sure they'll capture some of that. But, this is where we stand as far as that goes.
When did you stop putting it through the plant? Do you know what year?
It's been a long time. It's probably gonna be back in maybe 2015 or so.
Okay, so it only ran like a couple years
Yeah.
through the system. Okay. And at that point, you weren't taking in as much as you are now.
I mean,
by
that's
far.
what forced it.
Yeah.
So, the first couple of years, we weren't taking in as much because people didn't really know what was going on. We were trying to attract customers. And the storage tanks were empty, so, yeah, it was at that point.
Okay.
Where we were like, no, it's having a negative effect, we have to come up with something different, and that's when we started putting it straight through the storage tanks now. So in summary, the city designed and constructed the plant with the intention of taking waste from non-pipe connected users to create this revenue stream. The revenue that's generated by the hollow waste right now is about 25% of our total wastewater budget. So our total wastewater budget is about 1.9 million this year, I think, is what the operations cost is. So if you take $400,000 out of that, I guess what I would say is if you took away the $400,000 and looked at how much money would you save by not taking it, you would have to still remember that all the systems that we're using would be used less, but they would still be used because we produce 2 million gallons of our own. Which actually we should offset out of the costs that we're taking in because we're treating our own sludge at the same time. But if you did that, the lost revenue would likely end up in a significant user rate increase or a tax increase if we had this to be subsidized from the general fund, which obviously we did not want to do. The good thing about it is, like this year, the revenue stream is scalable. So if costs increase, which they did, then we go up. So we start at 6 cents, now we're at 7, 9, 11, and if the budget that is proposed goes through, it will be at, 8, 10, and 12, or $80 per thousand, $100 per thousand, and $120 per thousand. We've become a regional resource for the surrounding towns. If we decided to not take it anymore, we would have a huge negative impact on 5 towns. And then there was some talk about only pipe-connected people being able to use the wastewater plant. And so my question would be, why would we want to discriminate against other citizens of Ellsworth? Just because they're not connected to the public sewer, they still pay taxes and they still have septic systems that need to be pumped. The material has to be hauled somewhere, and by not letting them use the plant, they will pay more because it will be trucked further away. And then, so the cost of taking our biosolids elsewhere was when we were having the issues with main organics. And so I was like, okay, well, let's look at what it would cost if we took our stuff somewhere else. And this is current. So this is what we're paying right now, which I was hesitant to put up here, but this is what we're paying right now to send it to Canada, all in, $85 a ton. Okay? We were paying Main Organics to do the same thing, $115 a ton. $113 to $115 a ton. But I did look at sending it to a landfill. Juniper Ridge at the time that I was looking wasn't taking it. They had too much already. Heartland opened up a new cell. So the city, their town manager, because Heartland owns that landfill, it's not private, called me and talked to me about possibly bringing our stuff there. They want it. I said, okay, well, what are we talking? He said, well, it's $130 a ton. We're paying $85 all in right now, okay? It's $130 a ton, not including trucking. So that's just their tipping fee. And then, on top of that, for every 30-yard container we would send to them, we would have to send 2 30-yard containers of construction debris along with it, which I don't know where we'd get that from. But we would be on the hook for 2 containers of that for every 1 container of our stuff we sent to Harlem. So when you look at just the cost of the $130 a ton and what I estimated the trucking to be based on what we were paying to Casella Organics and the Main Organics, you're talking just without the 2 30-yard containers of C&D, $105,000 increase in that budget item. Considering the current economic environment, that number is likely to be much higher due to increased costs for diesel fuel and labor. The alternative is putting it into a landfill instead of beneficially reusing the material as compost. So where we send it in Canada is composted. What they would like us to do in Maine is to send it all to a landfill. And I've spoken at Husson 2 weeks ago. I spoke in Fairfield last week. They want me to speak in Freeport next week about the impact that's happening to all of us because they do not want to allow composting or land spreading in Maine anymore. But the solution that we found is actually very beneficial to us. The worry is, of course, if Canada decides to say no. So that's, and I might be going in front of the legislature next Monday to talk to them about the same thing, about repealing some of the laws that they passed last legislative session. Any questions?
The reason that Maine doesn't want us to compost compared to Canada is the PFAS. That's the reason.
Yeah, we're the only state in the country that doesn't allow composting. See, what people don't understand is that the areas in Maine that have had massive PFAS outbreak, like Fairfield, which was a pretty hostile environment that I went down to Spokane, is because you have these places that I call legacy sites where municipal solids as well as paper mill solids were spread on the same field for decades. And so over the course of those decades, the PFAS eventually accumulated because it doesn't break down, and it made its way down through into the water, the water table, and it got into drinking water wells. Our compost, when we were composting it with Main Organics only sold it to construction companies. And so if they were doing a road project and they needed to replant a median, they would spread our compost to replant the median, and then they would move on to their next job. We weren't spreading this stuff on the same piece of land over and over and over again. And so I tried, I was part of the Maine Boots Coalition, Work Boots Coalition that opposed these legislation, trying to point out to them that there are responsible ways to manage this. But you have to let us do it. But at the time, there was no sentiment to hear that, and so they just passed 2 laws that severely impacted us. And not just us, the other law they passed limits the amount of bulky waste they can bring up from out of state, which is what you have to mix the solids, biosolids with to put it in the landfill. Because biosolids shrink over time as the moisture goes away, and the landfill will collapse. So you can't just dump it in there. You have to put it in there with construction debris or whatever to bind it. Maine doesn't produce enough of it. That's why they were bringing it up from out of state. And then the LD 1369 shut that down. at the same time as they made the law telling us to send more to the landfill. And so it created a perfect storm, and now repercussions are starting to come. But that's as much as I can tell you right now.
Has our specific waste product been tested for PFAS?
Yes, and actually, we were quite low. So, the last test that I looked at, one of the things they do is they say, okay, if you took your biosolids and you spread it on a field for 100 years, or 75, or 50, or 25, what would the impact be? Would it go over whatever the standard is they set for the PFAS limit? And for the 3 different PFAS chemicals they tested with, 2 of them you could spread it for 100 years and it wouldn't exceed it, and 1 of them you could spread it for 75 years, I think, and you wouldn't exceed it, which we don't do, but, I mean, that's what the testing showed if we were doing it. And there are legacy sites in the state that have had stuff spread on them for decades and do not have high PFAS. So it's not a situation where all biosolids have high PFAS. It's a situation where there are specific areas where, yes, it does, and it wasn't managed properly because people didn't know about PFAS. But PFAS was created in the 40s and it's been in our environment since then.
What is it used for? Like, I mean, what is it
Do
found
you have any
in?
nonstick pans in your house?
Yeah.
You're eating PFAS.
Great.
Do you have
That's why you're
any,
not
do you have
supposed
any
to-
Gore-Tex?
It starts chipping, you're supposed to throw those pins away.
Yeah. Do you have any Gore-Tex? PFAS. Stain-resistant carpet? PFAS. It's in a lot of stuff, tons of stuff. There's probably more PFAS in the dust on top of your television than there probably is in our wastewater. But the thing is, I try to make people understand is, where do you think the PFAS that is in our solids comes from? Right? Because we don't have metal plating industries in our town. We don't have big industries in our town. It's from us. It's been in our environment since the 40s. It's been in our houses since the 40s. We're on the back end of it. We're trying to figure out how to take it out and manage it now. But it's not an emergent contaminant that all of a sudden we we can't expose people to this. No, you've been eating and drinking and wearing it for years. We're just trying now to figure out how to mitigate it. So, DuPont, all them people, lawsuits against them, they're the ones that produce it. You know, there's all kinds of that stuff going on too, from the other end, to try and, it's no longer allowed to be used in manufacturing. But the cleanup is a bigger problem for everybody. So, we're right in the middle of it. Well, I'm right in the middle of it. But, so.
I need to go home and throw away my pants.
But if you think about
And my
it, you've
clothes.
been eating at a nonstick pan since you were a kid.
Yeah, I know.
If PFAS was if you had that much PFAS, you would have been sick long before now.
Well, the important thing is that colon cancer screening has gotten reduced from age 50 to age 45.
Yeah.
And we don't know
I had mine
why,
done.
but,
Right, yeah.
anyway, also schedule your colonoscopy if you're 45 or older.
Yep.
Throw your
Says the
pants away.
doctor.
She's actually,
Steve, did you have an
I actually
on-topic
go to her
question?
doctor.
I don't mean to be rude here, folks, but we gotta.
I
we gotta
do, I do.
Reel
Steve
it
had
back
a
in.
question.
I got a couple of statements. To just comment on that, I think certainly your methodology makes a lot of sense when it comes to that off-topic subject, but I think the key to that whole thing is detection has begotten stronger.
Yep.
Is that fair? I just want to
We now know what we're dying of.
Yeah, right.
I want to ask a couple of questions, because
Sure.
we disagree about the finances,
Yep.
okay? Not about your qualities to process this polite term.
Yep. Biosolids.
Stuff.
Stuff, okay.
Biosolids.
You had a screen up there that showed $1 million profit over,
Since the beginning, so
Right.
since 2013.
okay, so 10 years,
Yeah.
right? $1 million
Yep.
over 10 years. So is that, I can't see that, but does it
It's
say a mil?
1,198,358.
All right, so 1.2 million.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So 1.2 million, and you're only counting variable costs here.
What do you mean?
In other words, you haven't, your whole budget, I mean, you've got variable costs in here. You don't have cost of employees, cost of plant, You don't have any of that in that number.
No, I mean, one of the reasons I didn't is because, okay, let's just take dewatering out of the plant for hypothetically. We're still working 8 hours a day, we're still paying our guys 8 hours a day. They would still be employed 8 hours a day. The plant would still run exactly the same as it is, 8 hours a day. So,
So if we stopped doing septic, you wouldn't reduce the number of employees you have at the plant?
no,
So it isn't the cost of that.
So that number at 1.2 million is $120,000 a year.
yeah.
Fair analysis.
Yep.
But you're only putting, and I'm gonna make my comments and then listen to everyone's ideas here, but
Yep.
my continued complaint about the sewer department is it's all financial, okay?
Yep.
And if you're making $120,000 a year, you've got to take that $120,000 a year and start putting that into some of your fixed cost. For example, in my opinion, you're buying milk for $3 and selling it for $2. And that's just my opinion. But my opinion comes from 2 accounting firms and Moody's. They all say we're covering this deficit up with the general fund. $120,000 a year. You've taken the money you took in, minus your variable costs, and you're getting $120,000 a year. I don't buy for 1 second that that shouldn't be spread over the fixed cost that's gonna reduce that substantially. I mean, those numbers right there says that your guys aren't hauling those pumps out there and hooking it up like you're talking about. That you-
Why?
Because that number doesn't allot for any of your personnel costs, it doesn't allot for any of your plant costs, it doesn't allot for any costs other than the variable cost. Let me finish.
Yep.
Doesn't allot for anything except your variable costs.
Mhm.
And in your budget this year, you have $75,000 that you want for a pump
Mhm.
to cut down on some labor,
Mhm.
okay? Well, you don't have any of your labor in there. You don't have any of those other costs in there. And where I'm going with this is simply this. When I got elected, I read the financials that was available to me.
Mhm.
Then since I've been elected, there's been one audit that has come through that I have read the financials, okay? And then Moody's. And the minute I saw those financials, I'm like, this is a disaster. And where I think we have the difference is this. I think we're hearing how much revenue you're taking in, okay? Taking in $1 and spending $1.20.
Doesn't make sense.
Right, exactly. And that's where I think you're at. And if you wasn't there, we wouldn't have 2 accounting firms and Moody's saying we're covering up deficits with the general fund. That's where I'm going with this. Is the financial side of this, not anything more than the financial.
Yep.
And you stood here, and I'm just saying, I believe you believe it,
Mhm.
okay? But you stood here and said the cost is 4 cents a gallon, okay? That's $20 for 500 gallons of sewer. A $20 bill,
I said 4 cents is what we would break even at back in 2012.
okay. So I believe you said that it was our cost is 4 cents a gallon. My point is this, I don't care who we are or what we think we are. You can't take a $20 bill and get rid of 500 gallons of sewer.
Really?
Really?
Yes, you can.
No, you can't. I may not be too bright, but you can't take $20 and get rid of 500 gallons of
It
sewer.
would be fairly close if you're paying, well, right now, my slide shows that you're paying $70 for 1,000. So half of that would be 35. And that's at our rate now. You'd go back 12 years ago, the cost would be completely different.
I don't buy it, and neither does 2 accounting firms and Moody's.
So-
That's all I'm gonna say. I'm done
So
talking.
I'll be anxious to see what Woodard and Curran says, because they really, that analysis, as you'll see, is very deep. But what it could be too, is it's actually helping that deficit. It would be more without that, because you've got to remember, you have a debt service for a $20 million plant. that we're gonna be paying for, and that is a huge amount of that budget. And so that, and, I mean, the chemicals and the other things that we do, and
Yep.
this could be, and I'd like to see the analysis, I'm like you, I'm glad that Wood and Curran is doing that, because it very well could be that without this extra revenue, that we would actually have a bigger deficit.
Oh, yeah.
I know you don't believe it, but you also have to know, it's just like when if you're making a pot of soup, you've got a, which is kind of gross to say about a wastewater treatment plant, but anyway, if you got a pot of soup, it costs you this much money to make that pot of soup, right? If you want to add to it, it doesn't cost you twice as much to make that pot of soup because you've already got the ingredients and the things going into it. And that's what he's saying. You're already running that plant, and you're running that plant for 2 million gallons, which by the way is a lot of stormwater with it too, but that's another whole thing. So you're already running that. So to put this bit through and it's not even going through the entire plant, isn't costing you the same amount of money as it is to do 50 gallons compared to 100 gallons. It isn't, because you've got base costs. I know you're doing that, but you've got base costs, and those base costs are never going to change. It's not like buying 6 eggs versus 12.
Can I unlock my mouth for a second? I know I said it.
Well, the question is, are there
No,
fixed?
sorry, you're done.
There are fixed costs
Are
that
there
aren't gonna
fixed
change.
costs that should be in this? And you said there were, there's electricity, there's wear and tear on the pump, there's probably.
Yeah, I
a little
mean,
bit of-
A little bit of it.
so two things I would say to Steve, when you talk about fixed cost, okay? So as I said earlier, if we don't dewater, my guys are still there 8 hours a day. The plant's still running exactly the same way it runs. There's no increased cost, so if there was the one, labor cost that I should probably add in there, and I'll have to go back and try and figure it out, but there are times when I do pay guys overtime to stay late to run the centrifuge so we can make room for the next day. So I did not include that cost in here, but it's not gonna change it significantly, because we don't do it that much. But just to close that point, if I was running the plant extra because of the dewatering, then yeah, I would include that in the cost. If I had hired another person specifically to handle septic, I would include that in the fixed cost. None of that is the case. The trucks that come in, basically, it's self-service. We have very little interaction with that. And so, if you talk about labor costs, in the summertime, that pump that we're talking about setting up and tearing down, like I said, we leave it out there all summer. So there is really no additional labor cost to it, because once it's set up for the summer, it pretty much stays like it's sitting out there right now. But if there were an additional, if the guys had to work overtime to set that pump up or whatever, then I would include that cost. The other part that I think makes my deficit look scary to you, which we've talked about, is the depreciation. So I just recently with Ann, went back and I started looking at the audit report and what the depreciation was that was listed in the audit. And there was thousands of dollars
Yeah. I was
that we
gonna
were
talk about
carrying
this,
as
yeah.
depreciation that we shouldn't have been. Because there was the clarifiers from the old plant, and there was a bunch of stuff from the old plant that we were still carrying depreciation on. The old plant's gone. It's been destroyed and planted over. So all of those depreciated costs should have come off the depreciation number. The clarifiers that we built, the addition in 1992, those things were carried in our depreciation schedule. And so our depreciation is probably gonna go down quite a bit this year.
Significantly, across all departments. There
And
hasn't
so-
been updated capital.
And
assets for a
so
long
I
time.
think once that also comes into play, you won't be so scared by the audit report. Because we were carrying stuff in the audit that we shouldn't, once the old plant had been torn down and we had moved over to the new plant, we should have taken that stuff out because it no longer exists. The clarifiers are gone. They no longer exist, so the money we paid. The pumps that we put in the driveway to pump stormwater, no, that stormwater system no longer exists. That diversion system no longer exists, so there's stuff that we had in our depreciation that we should have taken out of the depreciation when the old plant was destroyed.
So over the last 10 years, approximately 120,000 a year. Now that directly would really come off what your fixed costs, like your employees and everything. So that's really shows that you possibly saved about $120,000 on average per year.
No.
That would have directly come off what your operating expenses are,
Right.
that you would have to have anyway.
Yeah.
So if you did away with taking it, then it would assume that it would cost you $120,000 more a year to run the plant than what it currently does. Is that what that?
Yeah, I mean, so
basically-
just if you look at this number here, this is a real number, that's $311,749 for 2022, fiscal year 2022. So if you were to go back and look at our budget for 2022 and our operations costs, and you were to subtract that out of it, it would be a significant hole in that budget. And you wouldn't save 100% of the money that because you wouldn't stop running it. We generate 2 million of our own.
Right, you still have to
So you would
run it no
still
matter
have
what.
to treat it, you would still have to put it through the centrifuge, we would still have to pay to ship it to Canada or wherever we were shipping at the time. Only we wouldn't be getting any offsetting money coming back in from charging other people to do the same thing. So it's a two-edged sword there. Not only are we taking money and spending money to treat it, but we're also treating 2 million gallons of our own. That I'm not taking any offset for that.
The way you treat it now, it doesn't really put wear and tear on the centrifuges and all that, or it's still,
I'm not gonna stand here and say that we would have less maintenance if we dewatered less. We probably would, but I guess what I'm saying is, we do a $25,000 major service every 3 years.
For the centrifuge though, not the entire plant.
Yeah. So for the centrifuge, I'm talking about the centrifuge. So for the centrifuge itself, as recommended by the manufacturer, every 3 years, we have a major service done. If we weren't taking the extra stuff and just doing our stuff, we would probably still be doing the 3-year major service, because that's what's recommended. And so, are we incurring more cost by taking it? Yeah, we're incurring more chemical costs, and we're incurring, probably some more maintenance costs, but if you take and quantify that number against how much we're making, it's
Well, that was
a
included
drop in
in
the bucket.
your-
Yeah, it's included in this.
that was included in your $1.2 million.
Yeah,
That's
so this
included.
is 122,000 is maintenance cost.
Now, those chemicals, is that treating our 2 million gallons also?
Yeah,
So them chemicals are taken out of that, which,
that's what I'm saying, like, I didn't try to back out what we would have to spend
Right.
just doing our own stuff, because I'm not that good. But, so it's included. So you'd have to back that out, which would make it look even better. Because we're gonna be on the hook to treat our stuff no matter what. We're gonna spend the money to treat our stuff no matter what.
right.
And we're not making any money off that. So,
Can I unlock my mouth?
Yeah.
I just want to say this.
Stop you.
I just,
I want to hear what Eb's
I
saying.
just want to say this. I don't want, I mean, we beat this together.
I know.
Yeah.
Forever, okay? I just
Yeah.
want to say this, that the accountants don't tell you how to process sewer,
right.
okay? So if the accountants are so wrong, why are we paying the accountants?
It's not that the accountants are wrong, it's the data that they've been given isn't right. And that's why we've spent the last 4 months updating everything that needed to be updated. One of them was our capital asset inventory. It was completely off. It's 7 or 8 years old. So we've done that. And we've gone through the books. line item to get everything straight again. So the data going into the accountants is only as good as what we've given them, and we are confident that it's going to be much better now because we have gone through it. We have eliminated a number of things on the capital asset list, and the reason that we did this is because our new accountants, our new auditors recommended it, and they wanted to get to the bottom of capital spending and capital projects and capital assets. So that's why.
But
He's saying what he's saying.
But it's also, so part of the issue that you're talking about is the deficit, that $3 million deficit, which is what the auditors were really focused on. And the fact that deficit doesn't seem to be being impacted. It did go down slightly from FY '21 to FY '22 audit, but not very significantly. And the deficit has been in existence for, before this new plant was even built. It's an old figure that's grown over time. Again, last year it went down slightly. The hope is that with rate increases that we've implemented over the last, if we do this year, 2 budget cycles, that we'll continue to be able to chip away at that deficit. The reality, though, is to majorly impact the deficit, which is what we need to do for Moody's and what we need to do at some point for the auditors, we need a revenue source. And we need to find a way to have additional revenue in that wastewater treatment plant in order to attack that deficit. And one way that Mike and I have discussed is, much like we pay for water in the city, taking on the city beginning to pay for sewer, because we don't pay for wastewater for this building or the school department or all of it. And that would be one way to infuse a significant amount of money into wastewater to start addressing that deficit. And that's something that I think we have to look at long-term in order to appease Moody's and in order to appease the auditors, to show that we are actually making progress at attacking that deficit and lowering it. Because the way we're going now with his budget, especially when you figure in depreciation, he's operating in the red, continuing to operate in the red.
That's my pitch.
But the depreciation number is wrong. That's the point. That's the material point of the depreciation discussion, is that it isn't right. And it was the auditors, we sat down and we looked at it, and that's when we started this investigation into capital assets and looking at those numbers. And there's a lot of things that are just flat wrong.
Right, so that
But it's too soon
depreciation,
to say what it is.
the
because-
depreciation is going to be less than it was last year, but it's still going to be an impactful number on his overall budget that we need to be mindful of. And the way it was chosen to address that back when they built the plant was to create this revenue source. The revenue source, as we've increased the rates, I think we're gonna see, because we've increased the volume, we've increased the rates, so those first few years when we were only taking in
We're doing nothing, much.
very little revenue, now we're up into the 3, 4, hopefully
We'll be over
$500,000 revenue each year. We've reduced our disposal costs this year in addition, so, I mean, the effort is being put into figuring out what we need to charge in order to be profitable, so that that profit can be put to making him
Help the
operate in the
ratepayers.
black instead of in the red.
And then the other opportunity that having this business has afforded us is what's happening right now. So there's a school, a big school, who has wastewater lagoons, and they send all their flow there, and then they spray it on the ground around the school. And the drinking water has popped up with contamination, PFAS. So they're going to be removing that system. And we are the only ones nearby that would be able to take that volume of water. It's treated water, it's not sludge. It's pond water. but it's approximately 9 million gallons of it, and we're gonna get the majority of it.
Make sure you get into the profit.
At 7 cents
I knew that was coming. Good.
At 7
I'm
cents a
not
gallon.
against taking in revenue, I'm against
Yeah.
taking in revenue that's
Yeah.
below cost.
Yeah.
That's what I'm against.
And so this stuff is water that we're not gonna
Customers.
even put through the septic system and into the storage tanks and into the centrifuge. It's just really pond water that's just gonna get dumped into our pump station and go through the plant as water. It's not gonna, we're not gonna do anything extra to treat this water. And we're getting 7 cents a gallon for it.
And if I can just, so when this plant was built, it was a $13 million plant that ended up being almost $22 million. And the biggest reason for that was because we have so much stormwater. We're a sanitary district, and we're not a combined sanitary district. And so we could not change the way that we process that water. So we had to build a plant big enough to take all the city's stormwater too. So the plant is actually built much larger than,
Yeah, so the
Which is why
plant's
you could
built
do
to
all
take
this
a
stuff.
peak of 6 million gallons a day.
and we take two.
We don't even take, we take 700,000
700,000, yeah.
average.
So it's an expensive plant. When we went into this,
Mhm.
we knew that there was no way that the people within the district could pay for that $22 million building and the depreciation and everything. We knew that coming in. And you're right, I mean, the old plant already had us in a deficit because RBC shafts broke constantly.
Mhm.
I mean, it was just, that plant was a mess. I mean, obviously, we had to,
And we were,
Take
I
it
mean,
in.
when
So
I
it
first
was
started
not
working
good.
here, whether you were Walmart or a two-bedroom house, you were paying $300 to connect to the sewer.
exactly. So a lot of changes were made to try to make this more profitable,
Yeah.
but it was
Now,
just,
we just got a sewer permit connection fee of $47,000.
yeah.
I'll just leave you with this. You can't lose money and make it up in volume.
No, but
Oh, I know that.
you've got to be open-minded enough to look at that cost analysis. And if that cost analysis shows that we're not losing money by taking that in, it's got to be the end of this conversation. There's other reasons that we have a deficit other than, that deficit is not created by taking in that septic.
If the city pays, how close does that get us if the city facilities start paying sewer and water?
Oh, it's.
It's hard to say because we don't have any, I'd have to look at the water meter usage, but like the high school, middle school, city hall, none of our public buildings.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
you know
most of it.
exactly how
It's-
much.
it's
Pay
debt
sewer,
service.
so-
It's-
It's something we're gonna look into, and we'll
We'll
figure based on,
So-
you know, flow and everything, and
It's so
we'll,
high because
we'll be able to figure out pretty close
Yeah.
what it would be for,
Because you have the water numbers.
I have the water
yeah,
numbers.
from the water numbers.
So what goes in usually comes out, so.
And that's the reason why the water department looks so good, is
Yeah.
because the city pays a lot
A
of
lot
money
of
for fire
money.
protection.
Wooden Turn is gonna do a cost
Exactly, so
analysis.
now put
That
that into
would
the wastewater
actually
treatment plant and see how
Put this
good you
into
look.
perspective with your employee, with everything. And
I mean,
then
I gotta
show-
talk to them. I called Brent and I told him, you guys did us a cost analysis in 2013. We need an updated cost analysis. So I just, you know, my conversation, the next conversation is going to be, you know, please make it comprehensive, to include, everything that's impacted by us taking.
If they could put it in there, like, oh, the overall, everything, it's gonna cost you this much, no matter what. By taking this, that, no matter what cost actually is down or up,
Mhm.
you know, I mean,
Yep. Like I
that's
said, you know.
something they can
The
accomplish.
fixed cost shouldn't really change, because if we shut down the septage, taking it in, the plant would still run exactly as it's running now. We would probably run the centrifuge less, but we wouldn't stop running the centrifuge. So you'd have to figure out that.
I'll say this, I think we are making progress in this regard. When I first got elected, nobody wanted to hear about cost analysis, nobody wanted to talk about this, and a year and a half later, we're talking about it and we're doing cost analysis, and I thank you for that. I thank everybody for that, that at least we're taking a look at it, which is different than a year and a half ago. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Can we party now?
I think I need to go home and have a glass of wine. Holy
All
cow.
right. You need this, right?
So we
It's
didn't
8
get any,
I need
We
this.
we made a little progress with the vehicles,
yes,
Yes.
but
but we did not address outside agencies at all.
I don't think this,
Capital, I don't know, when people said capital, I don't know where we wanted to go with capital. I know the sewer pump was one of the capital sort of question marks. Other stuff in capital, I'm not sure there was what people's thoughts were.
It also talks about funding, the availability to funds usage of the
oh, yeah.
ARPA
Fund.
funds and whatever
The general.
general fund, undesignated fund usage. for
Unknown and undesignated.
Just other funding sources.
Right, so ARPA funds, you know, I mean, there's certainly uses that we can apply those to within the capital. I outlined some for technology.
Thanks.
Bye,
Have a
Mike.
good night, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Because we were gonna talk about, the watershed boat, we were gonna talk about taking out the lease for technology and using that for ARPA. Was that the software and the hardware?
The ARPA was the MS Office and the server software potentially.
Okay, because I had server hardware was a lease too.
Server hardware is a lease, but not for ARPA, but
Not
that
for
would be
ARPA? Okay.
taken out of capital and put in debt like the other leases,
Okay.
which I think you did that, right?
That has already been done.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, can you say what that, I'm sorry, I'm not in the right section, but if we, the two things that you said, MS and the software.
MS Office and server software, it's $18,000 and $15,000
Okay.
respectively. Those two, Jason has identified could be covered under ARPA, with
for
ARPA funds.
cybersecurity.
For cybersecurity, yeah.
Okay, that's the software, that's why, okay.
Yep.
In the MS Office, okay.
So that's $33,000.
Yeah.
I think we talked about we could also agree to put an agenda item later. There's a term limit on the ARPA usage this year or the winter.
Yes, we have to have it identified by
24.
December 31st of '24.
So we've got next year that
So we have 18 months
Okay, so no huge pressure.
to identify the needs or the wants of the council for the ARPA funds.
Yes, the only pressure is that it is worth less the longer we wait. Because
Right.
things cost more.
And there was also a conversation about the Moore Center roof being covered under ARPA, and I'm not sure on that.
Because that's a community,
Right. That one, we have to do some more exploration on that. But I did talk to Jim, and initially he had thought perhaps that repair could wait, but after this last rain, he went up and did some further inspection, and some of the leaking coming in on electronic,
yeah.
and it definitely needs to be done.
And it's not in our current capital.
It is.
Oh, it is,
Yep,
it's in
It
the-
is,
yeah.
under facilities.
Okay.
And if it were funded by ARPA, it would potentially change the mill rate by like .02, so not significantly, but it would decrease the estimated mill rate.
That along with some of these other things.
Yeah, I'd like to see it used a little bit, decrease the mill rate, because it's a bumper year for the budget.
Yeah.
And we've got another year to decide other projects we want to use it for. Because there'll be a good remainder, I mean, the roof.
There's
and
about
technology.
675,000 left right now in ARPA,
Technology will be 30 and the roof will be
150.
150. Can I ask two police department questions?
Sure.
One thing you put in the police budget was thinking if maybe the city manager and police chief aren't the same job next year. Does that, are we adding a person to the police department by doing that, by adding that back in? Because you're not a full-time person now, so it would like make a new full-time person where there isn't one
The
right now?
position still exists, but the salary would be returned to the police department. So when I left, when I took on this dual role, I was never replaced in the police department.
Okay,
So my role and my position within the police department still exists. It just, my salary went entirely to the city manager's office.
okay.
Right now, we're paying one salary for two.
Right, but he's not a
People.
full-time police chief, so if we're so the police are operating the way they're operating now, and then we are gonna add a full-time person who isn't full-time right now. That was what I was thinking.
If he goes back to being police chief, we have to hire a city manager and pay him a full, complete, different salary. Plus pay him to be police chief. Right now, we're paying him to be city manager, and he's being a police chief for free.
I understand that, I'm just saying the police department is operating today. What percentage of your time do you think is police chiefery?
It varies, you know, I mean, budget time, obviously, most of my day is spent with budget things. But the workload in the police department, based on what I do and activities, roles and activities that I plan to pursue further as sole police chief. So the mentoring of the younger officers, of course, still maintaining the budgeting, the mental health and well-being of the department, the future planning for the department, capital planning, those type of things are all things that, that I would, as the police chief exclusively, will spend my time focused on. Where now, I do, you know, going forward with a 5-year capital plan, I'll be doing that as police chief as well as the city manager. I don't spend as much time being able to mentor and work with the young officers and the young supervisors as I would as a full-time police officer, you know, police chief. The community involvement, unfortunately, as city manager, I have a lot of community activity and involvement in the community, but less so as specifically as the police chief. So as sole police chief, I would have more involvement, police involvement with the community than I do now in my dual role. So there's ample work to be done as a police chief that you know, isn't currently being filled because I'm not in that role full time.
Yeah. I'm not worried you won't be busy enough, I was just thinking, it's running as it is now, and that does technically add back a position. Just
Do we need it, is what you're saying?
do we need it? You know, I think,
Well, contractually, you're obligated because it's in my contract that I would maintain the police chief, so.
well, that answers that question then.
Do we have I'm sorry, do you mind, do we have an extra police officer because you're not there that we wouldn't need? You're still running with the same exact staff?
Same number, yeah.
Hmm?
Yeah. We didn't add any personnel, and all we did, when I took on this dual role, the only thing we did was, we promoted a deputy chief, and promoted a sergeant to a captain, in order to fill the administrative duties that I would no longer be able to do on a daily basis. That was the only changes that were made and so that deputy chief could serve as a department head, in the police department, for decisions that needed to be made that I had to, would come to me as the city manager, such as discipline, hiring and firing. Those types of things had to be done within the department, so that when they came to me as the final decision maker in the city, I would be removed from those decisions early on and have the final say.
You still have a lieutenant too?
We don't have a
You don't
lieutenant
have a
anymore.
lieutenant?
No, captain and 2 sergeants.
And then my other question was, we have a $10,000 fitness stipend, but when I took a tour of the building, there's a gym in the building, so do we need that, or can we get rid of that?
The new building, there will be a gym, but this fitness stipend is so every year they take a fitness test. And that stipend is for the passing of the test. So if they don't pass, they have to pass at a minimum of 40, 50, or 60th percentile, and they get paid out, they get compensated depending on where they.
It's a bonus for taking the test, not
And-
gym
And
thing.
passing it.
Right, and passing it, yeah. Yep.
And it's in their contract.
And it is also in the contract.
Okay.
Which the police department has tried to get rid of for many, many years, and the council has said no repeatedly, so.
Tried to get rid of the fitness stipend?
The
police
fitness
department?
requirement.
It was because it was required, it's mandatory.
Ah.
But years ago, we changed it, so as long as we have maintained 50% participation, then it's no longer mandatory for the entire department. But it used to be mandatory, and it used to, originally, it had disciplinary results. So if you didn't pass the test, you would be disciplined, all the way up eventually to potential termination. So, but it's been watered down considerably since it was originally put into the contract many, many years ago.
Do you think we're less fit?
He's looking at me while he says that.
I think we're more fit now because we have younger officers, but when I first started in the department, it was necessary,
Yeah.
to say the least. Although it didn't really serve its purpose, but it was necessary.
To get to the financial root of Casey's comments, questions, or whatever, as I recall, you said you added $50,000 into the police budget in the event that the job was divided. And I think that the rest of that salary might come internally, or is your question more, is 50,000 enough? You said it was 50,000 in the budget. And if those roles are divided, we know what the city manager's pay is today. And if that's the case, 50,000 is not enough for a police chief. Is that fair
Well,
to
because
say?
it's half a year.
Half a year. Because my city
Oh,
manager
right,
contract
okay,
expires
yeah.
in January.
Thank you.
So it would be
Thank you.
January to July.
Thank you. Okay, that makes sense.
I had a question on the clerk's office, Tony, because you had in here requesting a new deputy clerk. Are you still?
Not a new.
Oh, it says it is.
Tina Howes is requesting to be full GA due to the client load. I would need to replace her.
Oh, okay, because it said I'm requesting a new deputy clerk, so, okay.
Yeah, if I lose Tina, I would have to replace Tina. So I would still have 3 staff.
Because the deputy clerks, the 2 that she has now, both are
Shared.
split, shared.
Right.
Tina with GA and then Marcia with the highway department.
So would you need a full-time person though to replace Tina when it's a half person now? Was there some change that you said? You had said something about your budget that you were taking something away, or something was being changed in that budget.
The highway.
The highway position, we have half-yeared.
No, I thought it was in yours, that's why I was looking at that, so I was asking.
I think the only thing that I mentioned about my budgets were the election budget, that I don't have like an election contingency in case we ever had like a re-vote on a school validation or something. I only budget 2 elections.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay.
And the reality is, more years than not, the city has had to host 3 or more due to recounts or a revote of a budget. So it's probably something we should look at in the future.
So are we gonna
Go
talk
ahead.
about social services then next week?
I think so. I think we'll put those on the 11th.
I,
I
yeah,
don't
I
think-
can't do it tonight.
I'm so tired.
The 11th also when the green teams?
Yes.
It's not an emergency, we can talk about them next time.
And
Yeah,
Dale,
Such a small amount.
yeah, and Dale also brought that up, so I would
He's
I
not here.
suspect he
Yeah,
he may have an idea of what he's thinking on that.
Yeah. I won't be here on the 11th, but maybe I could just send you guys an email with my questions for that, specifically for the social services.
We can also do a Zoom for you, if you'd like to participate.
That one I won't be able to, because we're gonna be actually, the 8th one I can, but we'll be actually physically driving at the moment of the 11th, so.
You don't drive and do Zoom meetings at the same time?
Like I said, I don't know if we have an
Tammy gave me
operating system.
homework. Thanks, Tammy.
You're welcome.
Thanks
I'm
for
not
sending
gonna
those policies
understand
too,
it, but
Tony.
we will
Appreciate
talk
it.
about it.
I thought I was going crazy.
No, there's a ton of policies that
There
out
are, there's a ton
that-
of policies, and it is hard to keep track of all of them. But all of the agencies, when I sent their letters, did get a copy of the policy, the application, and same as they have every year, so.
Does anyone have any, other than outside agencies, does anyone have any other specific, you're just getting a lot of inquiries from department heads. If anyone has any specific questions about the specific department, so.
I have questions about TIF, which we don't have to get into specifics. I just wonder if it's something that we would need to consider for budget season, like identifying certain projects where TIF could fund things that we're already thinking of funding on this budget, could save taxpayer money.
So I did give you all this evening the colorful
Yes.
package. I can go over briefly with you if you'd like. The last page of that should look like this. This document came from the tax assessor, and it shows the 4 TIF districts that we have. The bottom one, number 4, Oriole Way Senior Housing, is new to the city this year. The first TIF on the list is the Economic Development TIF, and I have formulated this sheet to calculate at a 17.5 mill rate, because I think that's ballpark where we're gonna end up. And using that figure with the tax assessor's valuation of the properties, you'll see on the first TIF, the 4 yellow expenses that relate to economic development show on his sheet, and then they match the yellow on these sheets here, if you add them all up. So the total projects in that TIF are just about $393,000 for the year, but the revenue from that TIF is $679,000. So there's a net earnings there from that TIF district. And the same applies to TIF District 2, which is Leonard Lake Senior Housing. The revenue from that is about $317,000, and then the projects listed leave us a net of $25,000 or so. TIFs 3 and 4, all the tax revenue that we get from those TIFs are paid 100% back out through credit enhancement agreements. So we don't actually get anything to put into the bank for that. And everything matches color for color on the assessor sheet to my breakout of projects, and based on these assessed values and an estimated mill rate, the TIF revenues for FY24 would be $1.175 million. The total projects, which includes credit enhancement agreements, is $867,000. Gives us a net income of about $300,000. Now, I'm not a TIF expert, but there are restricted things that we can and cannot do with those TIF funds. And Tammy and Michelle may be able to interject on these, or we can have the tax assessor come in.
My question for it was that I had heard that, like Heart of Ellsworth, which we have under social services, could be funded through TIF because it's economic development in the district. So that was the one question I had about TIF, using the extra TIF.
Yeah, that I don't have an answer to, but I can ask.
I think we'd have to take a really close look at that.
Yeah.
Apparently
Yeah,
other
there's-
towns, other cities do it that way.
It would be, but you'd have to be really careful about what Heart of Ellsworth does for economic development. It's not a given on things like that. That one's a little tougher for TIF. We also need to look at we have a TIF plan, and we need to look at the plan to see exactly what we said could go there. I don't know about the housing. I can't believe that we give 100% back, by the way, but that's another whole.
And the
100%
figures that
credit
I've put on
enhancement.
these sheets are reflected on your budget summary pages already. So if the mill rate changes, we'd have to kind of revise that a little bit or whatever.
Yeah.
So for the housing TIF, 50% goes back to the developer and then 50% goes to the school department.
Right.
So
Oh, okay.
that, so, and then the
Memorial.
next one is,
They're already
Goes to the Moore Center.
right, into the Moore Center.
Oh, okay.
So,
I thought you said
yeah.
100% back to them.
And that's
It's like
obviously all
50-50. It's a
funded
50-50
for the
split.
school.
I wonder if they captured
And they're
that as,
invested on the school budget, I think. already.
was it, I can't remember.
I think I
We're gonna
did
find out
see
if
it
they
on
did
there.
capture it.
Near the bottom line.
Hmm.
Okay. So they're already spoken for, designated,
Yes.
used.
Well, the 308 isn't, but again, you have to be really cautious and careful what you use that for.
Yeah.
So
Who
when you
knows that, the
develop.
lawyer or the tax?
Our TIF plan really, unless you've changed it, the TIF
No.
plan is very detailed. Because when you do a TIF district, you have to put together an entire plan stating the district, and then whether or not you allow credit enhancement and all that. And then you have to tell them what you want to spend that money on. And then the Department of Economic Development approves it, DECD.
Oh, sorry,
They-
that was really
They
loud.
approve it. So we've told them exactly what we're gonna spend that type of thing on. Now, there are like miscellaneous projects, like we're doing the economic development, the business development plan is being partially paid for by TIF funds, and that's allowed in a certain section.
Yeah,
But-
this is last year's TIF breakdown, and you can see we took some out of the net income for comp plan, we took some out for the trail engineering, the business attraction plan that Counselor Bill just referenced, so there's still a net income
Yeah.
estimated from last year's TIF.
Can Janet give us that, just this, she doesn't have to give us the whole TIF plan, because it's like, but maybe if she could just give us the plan documents that shows what we can spend it on,
Yes.
that would be great.
Yeah, you have to identify it prior to being submitted. I mean, some of it is pretty generic, like some recreational type of projects that you have, but you have to, it has to apply.
Right, which is why,
Citywide.
that's the only reason why I said about Heart of Ellsworth, is
Yeah.
we gotta look at our plan and see if our plan.
Yeah,
Because
it
it's
just
not-
seems worth checking, because that would be.
Absolutely, yeah.
Would the council then see
$10,000
that,
that
could we decide where to put that money out of budget season throughout the year, or?
If a project comes up, that's what we did with the development plan.
Yep.
We said we took it out of TIF funds. It's usually one-time items, again, it can't be operational, but.
Right.
Some of it, as long as identified, like the economic development position is covered, and that entire department is covered under the TIF.
And I saw
And
part of
actually a
yours.
portion, or it used to be a portion of the city manager's budget, because that position covered, about 25% of their time for economic development. So it is pretty interesting. I love TIF.
That's okay.
It is fun.
Thanks for the info.
I even
And the
drew a
cool
map
thing-
for Gene. I was trying to explain it to him, so he has homework to do to study it.
And the business attraction plan may even tell us to change their districts, because it's also used to encourage development in certain areas. So, and the comprehensive plan may do that too, to say, we need to move our districts around. It's pretty cool, it is cool.
I'd like to just make a comment. I think that the city is very lucky to have you bounce around all these vacancies and fill all of these little voids, and wear all of these hats. It seems, I know you're looking for an extra person, but in your defense of that, you're
Don't
wearing
hurt
a
my
lot of
budget
hats.
request, counselor.
No, but you're wearing
You're
a lot
as
of
good as
hats,
two
and you're
people,
always
Tony.
winning, and I think that we're lucky to have that
Thank you.
ability, that you're faced and you take these challenges, and so I understand where you're coming from.
Thank you. I'm happy to help wherever I can help the city.
That's obvious.
Well, we're happy to have your help, how's that sound?
Yeah, we are.
And just real quick, I know everyone wants to go home. The packet I handed out, I think I touched base with most of you. I did print Counselor Hanson's email with her numbers, but I had already worked on several spreadsheets the last couple of weeks. My numbers are pretty close to hers, so I did look at actuals out of our software. But this is just one of the examples. So these darker columns, this is public safety. First line is police, so it's a 7.85% over last year's actual numbers, and so on. So -2% from 23 and 22. And then the bottom numbers are, as a whole, public safety department, police, fire, everybody included.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That is
And
awesome.
I-
Actual is just so much better than budget.
I only did our 5 biggest departments, public works, public safety, just time was,
Well, and that's the biggest number, so it just matters the most, so.
so,
yeah.
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you.
We all set?
Yeah, so, well, before you leave, so
No.
Monday, special meeting, 8 o'clock, school budget,
8 o'clock?
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
the 8th, it's the 8th. Monday, the 8th, at 6 o'clock, special meeting for the school budget, ratification, vote.
And that's,
then
that'll be the only thing we talk about
That's
that
the
day.
only
Yes.
agenda item. And then the next workshop will be the 11th, at 6 o'clock.
Which is
Thursday.
green
Thursday.
plan
Green plan will
and
be
budget
presenting,
discussions.
and then we'll further these discussions that we've had this evening.
Great.
And as a reminder, there is coffee with the clerks tomorrow from 7 to 10. If any of you want to stop in, we'll be here.
I'll be working.
I'll be in Bangor too.
I'll be in Bangor.
Oh,
I never
okay.
get free
Fun.
coffee.
That's it.
Are we not
That's
done
it,
with
thanks.
We're done.